Red Bull dominated the F1 world in 2022 by a wide margin over Ferrari and Mercedes. The fact that Verstappen won the Drivers' Championship with 4 races to spare, while his team won the Constructors' Championship with 3 races to go on the calendar, says enough about what kind of season the Austrian team had. Nevertheless, their eyes are set on the 2023 season, and there could be a massive setback to the genius design that they are planning to implement. If you want to know the problem Red Bull is facing ahead of the 2023 season, stay with us to the end. Max Verstappen and Checo Perez were absolutely dominant throughout the 2022 season, although the Mexican still struggled to get a firm grip on the P2 spot in the Drivers' Championship. Nevertheless, it seems like he doesn't want to give up and help his team by having the first 1-2 finish in the Drivers' Championship ever. The Austrian team was really dominant in the aerodynamic era, but the turbo hybrid era was hugely dominated by Mercedes. And according to Ralf Schumacher, Red Bull is preparing for a new era of dominating results. Now, Red Bull can shape a new era. That's a bit of a problem with Formula 1 because once the lead is there with a cost cap also in place, it's difficult for the other teams to catch up again. But I have hope that Ferrari can make life much more difficult for Red Bull next year, and Mercedes is also on the rise again. But in 2023, Red Bull will definitely be the team to beat. It's obvious that many experts and former F1 drivers are tipping on Red Bull to become the new Mercedes in the following years, at least until the 2026 season, when we'll see an entire new shakeup of the technical regulations. This is something that even the current F1 drivers, such as Leclerc and Hamilton, think is a very big possibility, but they said that they'll do everything to not have this outcome see the light of day. When talking about it, Leclerc said that he'll do everything in his power to not let it happen, while Hamilton added, "But the Ferraris have been quicker than them through qualifying, so all they need to do is pick up their race pace and they'll be right with them. I think we've got a much bigger step and steeper hill to climb, but hopefully not impossible." Horner was also asked about what the 2023 version of their car will look like, and it seems like the Austrian team doesn't like to experiment with new things now that they have found something that works perfectly well for them. In other words, Horner said, "Don't fix what's not broken," which totally makes sense for the Austrian team to do. But from the next season, we're going to see some new implementations, such as increased ride height. This won't affect Red Bull directly, given the fact that they have dominated the season with this ride height, but they will have to make some tweaks and adaptations to the 2023 version of their car. However, you have 2 hungry teams that are eager to take you down, and that's exactly what the Austrian team needs to fear in 2023. Just like Hamilton said, Ferrari are close to Red Bull. The fact that they are missing their race pace is something that they have to address urgently if they want to be in the fight for the championship. So it goes without saying that Red Bull will be the team to beat for the next season, and the fact that they have dominated the 2022 season with such ease just goes to show that they have been here for a long time and they have a target on their back. The team has announced a couple of updates here and there, and with them keeping the same concept, rest assured that for them to be beaten would be an enormously hard challenge for the top competing teams. However, they can rely on the new events that transpired from the FIA, and that is the plenty of the budget cap breach. The governing body decided to give the Austrian team a fine of $7 million and a deduction of wind tunnel time of 10%. According to Horner, this is a penalty that is too harsh and draconian, and it was imposed mostly because of the other teams' pressure on the FIA. Still, this means that Red Bull's development for the 2023 version of the car will have a massive hit now that they have also won the Constructors' Championships. In F1, if you finish ahead of where you finished in the previous season, you get an increased paycheck, but decreased amount in the CFD facilities, testing out the aerodynamical characteristics of the car. Horner spoke about the penalty, adding, "I've heard people reporting today that's an insignificant amount. I can tell you now that is an enormous amount. That represents anywhere between 1/4 and 1/2 seconds worth of lap time. That comes in from now. That has a direct effect on next year's car and will be in place for a 12-month period. By winning the Constructors' Championship, we became victims of our own success. In addition to that 10%, having 5% incremental disadvantage or handicap compared to the 2nd and 3rd place. That 10% put into reality will have an impact on our ability to perform on track next year." On top of that, Red Bull's main rivals, Ferrari and Mercedes, shared their thoughts on how they felt about the penalty. Earlier in this saga, Toto Wolff threatened to intentionally breach the budget cap for the next season if the only thing that his team would receive was a financial fine. That way, that would be totally worth it in order to bring themselves back to the top. Still, he added that, according to him, the penalty given to Red Bull was too small, but if you ask Red Bull, the penalty is too harsh. I think as for any penalty, for us, it's too little. I think any reduction in wind tunnel is going to be detrimental. How detrimental is difficult to judge at this stage. I think in absolute terms, $7 million is a lot of money. But in the bigger scheme of things for Red Bull, considering the investment they do on the power unit side and on the team, it's not. What does Ferrari have to say about this matter? Obviously, they are not happy. Throughout the 2022 season, Ferrari have constantly accused Red Bull of breaching the budget cap so early in the season, and Mattia Binotto spoke about how the FIA needs to have stricter regulations and insights as to how teams are spending money in the 2022 season. Now that the Austrian team has been officially found guilty of a crime for the previous season, rest assured that their rivals won't rest easy until some modifications as to what is considered minor or major aren't applied to the sport. When talking about the penalty and the outcome of this whole saga, the sporting director of Ferrari, Laurent Mekies, said, "We have talked a lot in recent weeks about what one can do with $500,000 more, or $1 million, or 2 or 3. €2 million is a significant amount, and we have given our opinion several times on this topic. We at Ferrari think that this amount is worth around a couple of tenths per lap, and it's so easy to understand that these figures can have a real impact on the outcome of the races, and maybe even a championship. As for the penalty, we're not happy with it, for 2 important reasons. The first is that we at Ferrari do not understand how the 10% reduction of ATR can correspond to the same amount of lap time that we mentioned earlier. Furthermore, there is another problem in that, since there is no cost cap reduction in the penalty, the basic effect is to push the competitor to spend the money elsewhere. It has total freedom to use the money. It can no longer spend on use of the wind tunnel and CFD due to the 10% reduction, on reducing the weight of the car, or who knows what else. Other team principals like Andreas Seidel said that they are not interested in what Horner had to say regarding the budget cap saga, because it would be another fairy tale. Nevertheless, the Austrian team has received its punishment, and all teams are now adamant that the FIA changes what's seen as minor and major in the budget cap breach. This way, everyone can have up to $7 million in reserve in order to breach the budget cap and try to be back on top again. As for Red Bull, the financial penalty may not hurt them that much, but the fact that they'll have less time in the wind tunnels is something they will have a hard time working out. Therefore, their championship hopes for 2023 took a massive blow, and we're yet to see the impact they'll have on the next season when Verstappen will try to win the 3rd consecutive championship of his career. What do you think about the penalty that Red Bull was given? Let us know in the comments below.